How many of you have ever received a paper cut? Well, it appears that most of you have. So this may have seemed an innocuous enough question, but in reality, it shows just how many people are at risk of contracting botulism. Hello, I'm Mallya2, and today I will be introducing you to the disease botulism. Today I will be covering the background of the disease as well as the bacteria behind it. I will go over the transmission, forms, symptoms, incubation period, methods of diagnosis, treatment, methods of prevention, as well as the mortality rate, epidemiology, the possibility of bioterror, as well as the experiment I have selected to present to you today, as well as its results, the significance of the results, and before concluding, I will explain some positive uses of the botulinum toxin. Botulism is a rare infectious disease. It is caused by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum, and its three main forms are foodborne botulism, wound, and infant botulism. Clostridium botulinum is an anaerobic gram-positive bacteria. When under stress, it releases lethal neurotoxins. There are 8 types of these neurotoxins. All of them are immunologically distinct, but induce the same disease, which is botulism. It is impossible to absorb botulism through intact skin. However, it is possible to absorb it through non-intact skin, mucosal linings, and the eyes. There is no human-to-human transmission of this disease. There is also no vaccine. However, there is an experimental toxoid that is available for laboratorians who are working with the disease to use. There are 6 forms of botulism. Wound botulism occurs when an open wound is contaminated with Clostridium botulinum. Foodborne botulism occurs when a person consumes a food that is contaminated with botulinum spores. Infant botulism happens when the small intestine has been colonized with spores of botulism. And adult toxemia is basically the same thing as infant botulism, except it occurs in adults. Inhalational botulism is a theoretical form of this disease, which would occur if the botulinum toxin were aerosolized, released into the air, and subsequently inhaled. Iatrogenic botulism is a man-made form of this disease, which would occur as an adverse reaction to therapeutic or cosmetic use of the botulinum toxin. The presenting symptoms of botulism, no matter the form, are always cranial nerve palsies. Neurotoxins released by botulism always disrupt nerve function, which would result in extraocular muscle paralysis. This would be presented as diplopia, which is double vision, or ptosis, which are drooping eyelids. Following extraocular muscle paralysis is paralysis of voluntary muscles. This occurs in a descending symmetric pattern. So it would start in your neck, it would expand to your shoulders, your upper extremities, and then your proximal to distal lower extremities. A ubiquitous symptom of botulism is constipation. Some symptoms unique to foodborne botulism are nausea, vomiting, and stomach cramps. Wound botulism can be characterized by lesions and abscesses on the skin. When death occurs due to botulism, it is nearly always because of respiratory failure, which is what would happen when your diaphragm and accessory breathing muscles become paralyzed. The incubation period for foodborne botulism can vary from 6 hours to 8 days. The median time span is between 18 hours and 36 hours. This disparity in the amount of time it takes for symptoms to be present is due to the amount of toxin ingested. For infant botulism, the incubation period is between 2 and 4 weeks. It is very difficult to ascertain the incubation period for wound botulism, as this disease primarily occurs in black tar heroin users. Heroin users can inject multiple times in short spans of time, which makes it very difficult to know exactly how long the incubation period is. In order to diagnose this disease, the toxin must be present in patient serum, gastric secretions, stool, or a food sample. All cases of botulism are public health emergencies and must be immediately reported to state departments. In order to successfully treat botulism, it is ideal to have the antitoxin administered within the first 24 hours of symptom onset. The antitoxin has the capability to halt paralysis and reduce the need for mechanical ventilation. However, the antitoxin cannot reverse any done damage. Rehabilitation is necessary to regain any lost function. In severe cases of foodborne botulism, a doctor may find it necessary to induce vomiting or bowel movements in order to hasten the release of the toxin from the GI tract. It is recommended to treat wound botulism with antibiotics such as penicillin or clindamycin. In very severe cases of wound botulism, tissue removal may be necessary. In order to prevent botulism, foodborne botulism specifically, exercise proper canning techniques. Reheat food, and if a can of food appears bulging or spoiled, do not consume it. Under no circumstances should an infant ever be given honey, as it can increase their chances of contracting infant botulism by 20%. And in order to prevent wound botulism, cover open wounds and do not inject or inhale street drugs. In the early 20th century, the mortality rate was between 60 and 70%. Currently, the mortality rate hovers between 5 and 10%. Epidemiology. For foodborne and infant botulism, males and females are equally affected. However, for reasons unknown, in wound botulism, primarily females are affected. 25% of all botulism cases are foodborne, and 70% of all cases are infant botulism. The former Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, the United States, and Imperial Japan have all employed botulism as an agent of bioterror. In the 20th century, Aum Shinrikyo, a Japanese cult, attempted a terrorist attack on a crowded Tokyo station by using aerosolized botulism. Thankfully, their attempt failed. A very new threat that botulism poses is through the recently discovered type H botulinum toxin. This is currently the most lethal toxin in the world, and due to its recent discovery, there is no information on it and no antitoxin. The experiment I have selected to present to you today deals with the botulism in the milk scenario. Botulism in the milk has always been a very worrisome scenario due to the lethality of the toxins and the vulnerability of the milk supply chain. The milk supply chain is very vulnerable due to the numerous transportation and processing steps needed to be taken before being made commercially available. Two mathematicians named Wine and Liu only exacerbated these fears with their calculations of the fatalities that would occur if botulism were to be released in the milk supply chain. Their calculations garnered much interest from a very widespread community, from politicians to scientists. And their calculations struck fear into the hearts of many. Weiner et al., the scientists conducting this experiment, intended to observe the activity of botulism neurotoxins A and B during pasteurization. They used fresh, full-fat bovine milk with the pH of 6.6. In it, they thinned 1 milligram per milliliter to the power of -1 of each toxin, and the ending concentration was 500 nanograms per milliliter to the power of -1. Then the milk with the toxin was exposed to heat treatment at 99 degrees Celsius, then 15 degrees Celsius, and finally 72 degrees Celsius. A mice bioassay at the end of the experiment showed that their pasteurization deactivated these neurotoxins by over 99.9%. This drastically reduces the supposed risk that Ryan and Lee posed. Now, botulism isn't all doom and gloom. There are some positive aspects. It's commercially available and used to treat numerous spasticity disorders and for anti-wrinkle therapy, commonly known as Botox. So today, I've addressed many aspects of botulism, a multifaceted disease. So now, let me ask you, if you get a paper cut, think of how something so simple could lead to a disease so deadly. So how do you feel about paper cuts now? Thank you.
Questions for Maya?
Tootsie.
Okay, I just wanted to know, you talked about the mortality rate. I just wanted to know how did the mortality rate drop so suddenly?
Okay, so she wants to know why the mortality rate dropped so suddenly between 2 centuries. And while I haven't done any exact research on that, my guess is that it's due to the discovery of the antitoxins that I mentioned as a treatment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hayat?
So you talked about serum being used as a diagnostic tool, but what is that?
Okay, 1 second, I wrote it down. Serum is a liquid that is produced when blood coagulates.
Thank you.
Chris?
In one of your treatments for wounds or something, I don't know if it was prevention or treatments, it was and you used these 2 antibiotics. Which one was more effective?
Oh, so you were asking if penicillin or clindamycin was more effective? I do not know, and I will definitely get back to you on that. Moby?
You mentioned something about toxins, and I was wondering if they can be evenly spread around the world.
So are you asking about the 8 different types of toxins and how they're distributed?
Yeah.
Okay. Botulism toxin type A is commonly found in the eastern United States, while type B is commonly found in the West, and it's the most common in Europe. Type E is commonly found in estuarine aquatic environments, and the other forms of botulism are really rare. Does that help you?
Some jazz hands for Martin.